couple of lines here. Lines. Oh, starting to skin over a little bit on top, so I'll have to be real careful. But I'll give it a shot to press those down. Didn't notice those before. And again, very gently. Very gently rolling out the lines. And this is actually just starting to skin over on the top. So we have to be careful about how much pressure we put on it or it'll tear. Got a little sticky up deal there. Press that down. Smooth it all out, and that looks pretty good. There we go. Here's our finished surface. It's got some smooth edges on the corner here. If you run your hand over this surface, you're going to feel sand. You're going to feel some maybe gritty parts, some sticking up. If your goal is to have a smooth surface on this, like you would maybe want, your countertop to be polished stone, you're going to want to remove that grit. There's two ways to do it. First way, the old-fashioned way with a little sanding block. But you don't want to sand it as much as brush it out. You're moving this in one direction. And all I'm doing is brushing off the little stuff here until I get the sand particles coming up that I want to remove. And in here, there's quite a bit of it around these edges. Okay, as you can see, this works pretty well. The other method is to take a straight razor, scraper razor. Floor scrapers work. This is kind of small for a larger project, but you can get large ones. And you just run this across here, and it'll pick up all those extra sands and move them out. You don't want to put any pressure on this. All you're doing is clipping off the sands that are sticking up. You get these over here, and this is literally all you're removing. You can see that on there. Now if I run my hand over that, it's nice and smooth now. We don't want ants in our project. Get out of there, ant. Okay, right in here, you can feel quite a bit of roughness. Let's try our razor here. That was pretty rough. Much smoother now. Get a nice consistent smoothness on that. Then we'll take afterwards and we'll vacuum, brush off the top parts. This surface here is going to be a little more difficult because you're going around a rounded edge. If you run this, you're just going to be digging into it. So we don't really want to do that. That's one of the places where you're going to have to sand. Again, we're moving in a single direction. And we're just knocking off the top edges. Not enough to really cut into the product, but just enough to smooth off those edges and knock down the extra sand. You can see all the little sands we're pulling off. Not much, but when you think about it, there's a couple of hundred little flecks of sand in there. You'd have a couple of hundred little divots on your finished countertop, which just wouldn't look right. Okay, one of the things I wanted to point out in this is the corners. we've gone over how to make sure this bull nose comes out okay on the top, because you have a tendency to have this be the thinnest portion if you shoot directly at it. So we go at 90 degrees here and 90 degrees here. Well, this has a tendency to build up a little more product in here. If you notice, there's even a little more of the black flecks along the surface edge here. I don't know if you can actually see that in there, but it is there. So what we do is when we're scraping, we're coming up into this edge and we're just going up towards it, clearing off all of the sand, and every once in a while you hit a little line. There's a line right here, and you can use this just to smooth that out. Go right up to that edge and lift a little bit of a product right there in the corner where it's not quite even. Real heavy spot there. Get that all smoothed out. You can even hear it get less grinding and more of a smooth surfacing as you do this. Then you can come back down the other direction into here and very simply smooth out that inside edge. So we're not actually cutting the material, rather using this as a single grit sandpaper, just cutting off the top edge of it and taking out this center part. And it only takes off the sands off the top of the product, again keeping the product from showing through on your top coat and making a little peak or divot. Yeah, specifically a peak, I suppose. If a divot, it would be a hole. And if you have little gaps or small indentations, like there's a little indentation right here, the top coat will level those out to a degree. You don't want them to be any thicker than the maximum thick film thickness of your finish coat. I showed you this area in particular because this was the worst I had as far as the build of the product in here. There's actually where the rest of the line of this countertop was more squared, this section right here actually rolled up a little bit more, so it's more of a concave edge than a squared edge. And also, if you're shooting into this edge directly instead of doing as the 90 we've talked about here and the 90 we've talked about here, it will fill this edge, because whatever bounces will bounce here and down or bounce here and up, and they'll all collect right in this edge. Luckily I didn't do this time. This was just some character in the surface that we're working on. So now we're looking at a much smoother surface, actually even a little less concentration of the darker pieces. Nice smooth finish, doesn't even pick up any extra pieces. Oh, there's one. But now you have a nice smooth finish to work with. There's a couple little spots here. Let's get those while we're at it. Okay, again, we've talked about those rounded edges where we have a hard time doing that. Let's get the sponge on that one. Our sanding sponge. Again, we're going to work this edge. And we're not really doing anything but just knocking down the particles that stick up, or a lot of times they're actually just resting on the surface, barely adhere. so that we have a nice consistent smooth surface to put our top coat on.